I'm gonna take this off because it's echoing right here. Yeah, myself. So this might just pick me up. Welcome to the Moynihan Report here on the Two-Way Network. I am your host, Michael Moynihan. And by the way, if you've been here on the live stream, we did a little pre-gaming. We had a little bit of a pre-game because we had a little screw up, but it was very fun. But we're back, and our show today is brought to you, as it has been in previous episodes, by our good friends at FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, an organization dedicated to promotion of free speech and the legal defense of those whose free speech rights are being abrogated. Did I say aggregated? We're going to aggregate them too. Go to thefire.org/Moynihan and sign up for their mailing list and give them some money while you're at it, you cheap bastards. But there's more. Tuesday, May 6th, just set the clocks, the countdown begins. We'll be teaming up with FIRE for a live event in New York City at the Village Underground, which is part of the constellation of Comedy Cellar clubs. And I'll be moderating a conversation about the Trump administration's record on free speech, featuring FIRE's Nico Perino. I like Nico. I just saw him on, I just got served up a video of Nico on YouTube. I wish they'd stop serving me these things. It's my job. Ilya Shapiro from the Manhattan Institute, Lee Rowland from the National Coalition Against Censorship, and more guests to come. The tickets are on sale right now, and you'll find the link in the description to this video, but get them fast. It's not the hugest venue. It ain't the smallest venue either, but go now, buy tickets, and guess what? You think we're done with the FIRE stuff? Nah. Today, we're joined by Will Creeley. He's FIRE's legal director, and I'm sorry to say that he's very, very busy these days because a lot's happening. And before I get to Will, I just want to say something, because you know what we're going to do today? You're out there, you're on the Zoom. If you're watching on YouTube, there's probably where do you get the Zoom link if you're watching on YouTube? Do you guys know? Is it two-way.tv? Oh, you go to two-way.tv. I guess that's where you get it. All right, so is two-way.tv/Moynihan. Get the link there if you want to come and ask Will some questions, because you know what? I have a lot of questions. But this is basically a forum on how Trump is doing when it comes to free speech. Everything is great, right? I was excited about it. You know why I was excited about it? I'm going to play a couple of clips here. I'm going to start with this clip, because if you believe everything that Donald Trump says and have done since he arrived on the political scene many, many years ago, maybe this clip was reassuring to you. Here is Donald Trump during his campaign, before he became president for a second time, earlier this year in 2024.
If we don't have free speech, then we just don't have a free country. It's as simple as that.
Rock of everything. That's, we need more free speech. You know, the thing about Donald Trump, he hired some people. This was what we said, like, is it going to be bad? Is it going to be good? Maybe he'll hire some people. There's be some, you know, some constraints on what he did this week in the first term. And then he hired Elon Musk. Elon Musk, you know, free speech. Also a guy who loves free speech. Let's take a look at this clip from 2022.
Can't emphasize this enough. We must protect free speech. And free speech only matters, it's only relevant when it's someone you don't like saying something you don't like, because obviously speech that you like is,
yes,
you know, that's easy. So it's the thing about censorship is that, sure, for those who would advocate it, just remember, at some point, that will be turned on you.
Yay, Elon. By the way, I was standing right off stage there. I was on that episode of Bill Maher, and I was very excited to, I didn't get to meet Elon, but very briefly. And he said all the right things. And then February 16th, 2025, scrolling through my Twitter, owned by Elon Musk now. And let's look at a tweet that I saw from Elon Musk. This is 60 Minutes. 60 Minutes are the biggest liars in the world. They engage in deliberate deception to interfere with the last election. They deserve a long prison sentence. They So, by the way, if you take the garbage out at 60 Minutes, expect to be deported to El Salvador. So, Will Creeley, that's where we are, right? This is kind of grim, right?
Yes, sir. It is bleak.
Well, I mean, this is a good time for you, a bad time for America. As the chief legal counsel for FIRE, I mean, I'm going to hand the ball to you and say, where do we begin? Because there's so many places to begin. What is the stuff that's on the front burner for you right now?
Oh, my goodness. Well, thank you for having me. Where do I start? How long is the show?
Just keep going and we'll cut you off.
Can we keep rolling for a while? I feel like, you know how the offensive linemen in football say, things are going better when you don't hear our names? That's what I feel like right now at FIRE. We are too many things going on, too much stuff happening. I haven't slept in weeks. I'm over there in the cab, rushing over to the studio, figuring out what just happened. Because two major opinions came down today. Where do I start? Let's see. How about, I like that last one. Let's start with the attacks on the press. 100 days in, we've got our good friends at the Freedom of the Press Foundation. They've got 100 items, each one worthy of its own op-ed. We could do 20 minutes on each one. Each one a serious threat to free speech. I mean, my goodness, we got mass federal agents kidnapping people off the street for writing an op-ed. When that first came out, we all thought, was it really for writing an op-ed? Folks, it was really for writing an op-ed.
But let me give you, I mean, you've heard this before, but for our audience, and I know there'll be some people out there that want to push back on this, that let's take the Columbia student. It was Mahmoud Khalil, who is in jail in Louisiana, I believe, right now.
That's right.
And he will be deported. The argument is, hey, it might not be nice, but we have a legal framework for this, and the Secretary of State can determine if somebody is a threat to national security. And this man, again, I'm just telling you their argument, this man supports Hamas. They are a organization that is described by the State Department as a terror organization, rightfully so. What's wrong with that argument?
Show me something that he's done, right? Show me something that's not just mere words. It reminds me of the old line appropriated by formerly known as Kanye West, that dude. No one man should have all that power. The Secretary of State giving a thumbs up or a thumbs down on whether someone lawfully admitted to be here, committed no crimes, no misconduct, can be kicked out just because of his opinion. I'd like to think that Americans are made of sterner stuff than that. I mean, you know, the First Amendment, I think of fundamentally as a check on government, right? It's not a permission slip. Like, you can say this stuff. It bounds government. It prevents government from hauling off and deciding that someone's political views are too crazy, and now they got to go.
Yeah, and look, I don't want to conflate his views, which I don't really know because everyone said he's a Hamas supporter. I presumed that some video had come out of him saying Allahu Akbar and, like, you know, praising the martyrs or something. And maybe he's done that. Maybe I haven't seen it. And I am open to that. And I don't want to say his views are comparable to X or Y views. But is it uncommon for, say, the State Department to say, well, we don't want this student coming in because we found out that he works hand in glove with a violent neo-Nazi organization in Ukraine and Russia and South Africa, wherever it might be. And they say, you know what, we're going to pass on this one. I suspect most people wouldn't be exercised by that. But does something like that happen?
I think the difference here, and you've identified it perfectly, is when you're let in the country, right?
Yeah.
You can have some screening, some view review when you come in, if you like that, just to coin a phrase. But once you're here lawfully, you're here. I mean, the First Amendment should protect you, especially when you're here on a green card. We're not talking about someone on a student visa whose status here is dependent on.
And legally, there is a difference.
Yeah, in fact, those
green card, you're afforded more rights than if you were just on a student visa.
I would argue that if you're here lawfully, whether you're here on a student visa or you're here on a green card, you should be treated the same. Viewpoint discrimination is bad no matter what. I don't want Americans to start getting comfortable with going to a protest and a cop can come up and say, let's see your papers. Papers, please. Yeah. And if you don't have, your passport on you, you just got a green card, you got your student visa, out you go. I mean, I don't want to start getting comfortable. I don't want to normalize that.
Yeah, I mean, it is normalized in other countries that entry to the country can often be prevented because of views. I mean, I know Milo Yiannopoulos or something is banned from Australia, and there's people that are banned from the UK. That's not something that I enjoy. That's not something. I mean, I've argued against that in the past, and I think it should be argued against here in almost every way. But what are those stops that should exist? I mean. So you have, how common? Let's start. So many damn questions.
We could go.
Let me start this way. How common is we saw the woman in, I believe, Somerville, Massachusetts, going to Tufts. Am I right?
Right. Yep.
Who was surrounded by agents.
Right.
This is also true with the Columbia student. There was somebody else who was coming back from doing some field research, and they said she had some contraband in her bag, but there might have been something else. I mean, is it that these are outliers? And we should be obviously very attentive to the outliers. Right. We want them to remain outliers. Or is this happening more than we know?
One thing I always want to be clear about is I'm just a humble First Amendment lawyer. I'm not an immigration lawyer. I've taken a crash course like the rest of my colleagues at FIRE over the last 6 to 8 weeks. But when these things first started happening, I called one of my friends who does immigration work on the Lower East Side. I said, "What's the deal here? Like, on a practical matter, to your question, are these things that just happen every day, but now we're seeing them?" And he said, "Well, look, people have always looked at social media, right? There is some awareness of who's coming in, but once you're here, and that's the deal. And that's how it's got to be if America's going to be exceptional. If America is going to be this shining beacon of light, this city on the hill, you can't just start hauling people off because you're out of favor with the regime. I mean, again, those are dangerous directions to point.
But you don't see it as that it's happening in this is 5 people,
right?
25 people, 125 people. What is the sense that you have? And again, I'm not holding you to these numbers, but obviously people are contacting you. You're following these, That's
part of the scary thing is that for a while, schools didn't know, right? So you were just having visas canceled willy-nilly. And the school would have to find out later, and the student would have to find out later. And it just seemed in that way that I think is endemic of everything that's happened this first 100 days, it seemed kind of blunderbuss, right? It seemed like a shotgun instead of a scalpel. They're just flipping switches and out you go. And what's creepy to me about it is that some of it seems to be informed by outside groups, third-party groups, in this case pro-Zionist groups that have assembled a list of people who have participated in protests. People have written op-eds like the Tufts student, Romeza Ozturk, and they're just going down the list. Check, check, check. A blacklist of people maintained by a third-party group, okay, you have the First Amendment right to maintain whatever blacklist you want. But when the government starts using that as a handy-dandy guide to kick people out, we're in a different place.
Is this kind of stuff, I mean, let's pull the aperture out a little bit, because FIRE, that last E in FIRE, and that acronym used to be education, now it's expression. You've picked up where the ACLU fumbled. The education component of this, the administration is going after Harvard, is going after Columbia. Those are the 2 big ones. I don't know what kind of rearguard actions are being taken against other places, but who knows?
Yeah.
But the Harvard thing, you have a lot of people that I think were probably supporters of FIRE in the past, maybe pulling donations or saying, I don't know if I can support you guys, because this administration is attacking this illiberal institution, which is Harvard. And Harvard, I will remind people, FIRE does a list. If you don't know this, you should make sure to look at this. Harvard was number 1, and number 1 is bad.
That's right.
That's not a good number 1. It was number 1 on the list of offenders, of speech offenders, Harvard University in last year's ranking, I think. Right?
They suck.
They suck.
They're in last place.
So let me put it to you. Fuck them. They suck. Put the fear of God into them. Make them straighten things out, and we're back on track.
There's an Onion headline that says, "Holy shit, person can't believe he's defending Harvard." That's kind of where we are. But listen, there's a process here. You can't have the purported cure be worse than the disease. They're ostensibly going after anti-Semitism, and they're cutting federal funding. Again, blunderbuss shotgun. What you have to do is say, here's what you've done. We had a federal investigation. You worked with us. You got to work with us by informal means wherever possible. This is not me, pulling this out of thin air. These are federal regulations. And if the school still won't take action to correct it, Then you move to an administrative hearing. There's a finding process. Congress gets to weigh in, the relevant congressional committees. Long story short, Michael, there's
Congress
a process.
does not exist anymore.
No, I mean, Congress. Remember them?
Yeah, this is the imperial presidency.
I think there were 3 branches at some point, right? But yeah, so there's a process to be followed. And again, no matter what you think of the ends, the means count. That's how we guard against, I don't know, arbitrary decision making of whoever's in power gets to decide who gets to exist and who doesn't as an institution. That's just wrong, and we fought against it again in under Obama as well.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is that politics has become much more of a team sport in my lifetime, particularly because of Twitter and things like this. And everybody lines up behind their team, and you see people already after 100 days starting to peel off and saying, "I don't know about this. Might not be the best thing." And even psychotic anti-Semites like Candace Owens, who is useless in almost every way, saying, "Well, I want to defend Harvard on this one. I can't believe I'm saying it." It's like, well, it's because they're fighting anti-Semitism, I guess.
When you've lost Candace Owens.
When you lost Candace Owens, I mean, where does the world go from here? But yeah, this stuff is that I just would advise people, particularly when it comes to the anti-Semitism stuff, because I know a lot of people who take this very seriously.
Sure.
They should. October 7th being, the largest massacre of Jews in one short period of time since the Holocaust. So it's a serious, serious issue. I take it very seriously. But I do sometimes want to throw it back and just say, look, if it was anti-blackness, if it was DEI type policies and it was the AOC administration saying we're going to punish you for not, taking seriously the concerns of black students, which is something they've been saying for a long time, I think with very little evidence they've been saying these sorts of things. But yeah, it's usually when the narrators change or when the heroes change, the story changes a lot.
That's right. The reason those procedures are in there is not because Congress just likes making a bunch of rules. It's to protect the schools and the students as well. Under Obama, we were fighting back against this suddenly very expansive definition of sexual harassment.
The Title IX stuff.
You got it. Any unwelcome conduct of a sexual nature, including verbal conduct. I mean, that's anything. And the reason we were freaked out about it is because you could ring up almost anybody. Laura Kipnis at Northwestern famously investigated for criticizing a Title IX investigation. I mean, it got...
And she wrote, I know that our listeners are voracious readers and they sometimes take my advice. Laura Kipnis's book on this is a masterpiece. I mean, she's brilliant. The book is brilliant. And it is one of those like Kafka Orwell nightmares. You're like, how did this happen? Because she did something Title IX? No, she made fun of something in Title IX in her class. But of course, those were overturned by the Trump administration and then overturned again by the Biden administration.
And we cheered them on, because we're not out here cheering for laundry. We're out here cheering for principle. So when Trump came in the first Trump administration, did the right thing, we said, damn right. I was a little bit bummed because we had a lawsuit going against Obama that had Hillary won, we would have seen the conclusion of it. But we were happy, do us a favor. And Trump got it right on free speech in the first administration vis-a-vis Title IX. But man, how quickly do you forget? It turns out that it's just all about power. Who wants to wear the boots, stomp in the face, and like you played those clips at the top of the show, a lot of lip service to free speech.
I'm somebody who believes broadly in free markets. I'm not somebody who identifies as libertarian for a variety of complicated reasons, because you're all insane. That's what I'm trying to tell you. But it's funny because there's so many people that I know that as these fights about, and I despise the word wokeness for a variety of reasons, but let's just say that from that battle that before Trump took office a second time, the conversation was, we're kind of beyond that. I think that battle was won. Because the market couldn't sustain it, right?
I love this point.
And I think that, it's funny, you have Hillsdale College, you have places for conservatives, you have Pepperdine that sort of leans right. Even at Stanford, you have the Hoover Institution on the campus there. If you want that sort of thing for your child, there's a place for it. But also, it was the marketplace of ideas that started pushing back on this stuff and actually was ultimately, the victor, I think, in that skirmish. The skirmishes keep going, but I think that's true.
I am fully with you. you, this is a point we've been trying to make in our Harvard defense. Yeah. Harvard has done many things wrong. Fire has been a persistent critic for 25 plus years. I mean, we were founded in part to deal with Ivy League excess at University of Pennsylvania. One of our co-founders, Harvard Silverglate, was
he was in Cambridge.
He was teaching at Harvard Law. He'd be the first to tell you. He's been trying to run to be on their board of overseers for the last couple of years. But again, the market, as you say, was starting to work. You had other institutions being founded. You had institutions like University of Michigan saying, you know what, we did a study. None of our DEI stuff is actually working. They were starting to pull back. And you started to see green shoots at Harvard. That's partly what's so frustrating about this Trump crackdown. Again, it's so sloppy, so overwrought, so unthinking, so censorious. I mean, it's sweeping up protected speech critical of Israel, that it overshadows what Harvard was doing already to start to respond.
Well, there's new speech codes too, right?
That's right.
I heard your colleague and my pal Nico Perino mentioning this, that they're replacing speech codes with different speech codes. Anything? I mean, I haven't read the detail of that. Is that just saying, you have to discuss certain issues, or you can't discuss certain issues? What is the kind of the terrain of that?
Yeah, the big one we're scared of that Trump, in the first Trump administration, pushed, and we've seen it adopted at the state level and the institution level, is this very broad definition of anti-Semitism. In fact, we may see a vote about it this week on the Hill to see if it becomes part of federal law. It's the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism. And it's just as broad as that Obama sexual harassment definition I quoted a few minutes ago. A certain perception of Jews is how it starts. And anytime you hear a certain perception of, you got vagueness problems, you got viewpoint discrimination. It lists a series of examples that include holding Israel to a standard that you don't hold other countries, comparing Israel's policies to those of Nazi Germany. That's core protected speech. You may not like it. You may find it offensive as hell, but that's what the First Amendment is for, is to protect your right to call any country, Israel, United States, Canada, Australia, you can call them Nazi Germany. I mean, if you can't compare something to Nazis, do you really have free speech?
If people aren't comparing things to Nazis who are nothing like Nazis, I wouldn't have a fucking job.
What are we doing?
I spend most of my time looking down the barrel of a camera saying, this isn't Nazism.
Right.
Gas chambers are Nazism.
Right. So
blood purges are Nazism. No, it's right. I mean, look, there are two things that in the conversation about Israel are commonly said, beliefs that are commonly held. It is certainly true that Israel is obviously held to a very different standard. People are very exercised about what happens in Israel. They don't give a shit about what happens in Syria. I can't imagine any intervention in those ideas saying, let's straighten this out. The way to straighten that out, again, is through debate.
Yes, sir.
And there's a lot of people on campus that, holds views that are the opposite of the views that they're trying to sort of squelch.
That's right.
So I think that, you have a robust debate. Would you want somebody on the campus who's making those arguments to not be able to make them seems wild to me. All right, let's go to targeting individuals. I'm not going to go to the people out there yet, but I'm sure they're braying. Is there a braying mob there, Jason, that's ready? I don't have my earpiece in because it's, so I took it out. But I'm sure that there's a braying mob of people.
I'm ready.
That are mad at me and mad at you.
I've done C-SPAN Sunday morning calling shows.
Well, that's the definition of anti-Semitism. those morning, if you don't get a call about the Jews, you're not doing C-SPAN on Sunday morning.
God bless the host of that show. She was so quick on the trigger. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. They still say thank you to the frothing anti-Semites. Okay, let's talk about this, the revenge instinct of this administration. I mean, you have two people who have been directly attacked, cited in executive orders, saying that they should be investigated. And my first response to this, one of whom was the anonymous.
Right, Miles Taylor.
And the other one was a guy who was dealing with election security. I believe himself a Republican.
Yes, sir.
And my response to this, and when I first said it, is that it's Nixonian with a difference. Nixon and the administration tried to hide it.
Yeah.
They were using the IRS to go after the enemies on the enemies list. this is public. I mean, there were media, quote unquote, in the room while he's saying, yeah, very bad guy. He's a very bad guy. We got to go after. I mean,
That's
this
pretty
is
good, by the way.
not what I expected. I expected some hiccups. I expected some weirdness. I expected some things that were, direct affront to the Constitution. But this one, I'm kind of surprised hasn't attracted more attention.
Yeah, my colleague Bob Corn Revere just wrote what I'm going to consider
The great Bob Corn Revere.
The great,
yes, he's great.
I'm very lucky every day to go to work with him. But he just wrote what I'm going to consider 100 days in as the definitive Nixon-Trump piece. And God bless him, he published it at foxnews.com. It already had 1,000 comments in the first couple hours. As Bob said to me, all of them future fire donors, no doubt. And Bob said, there was some graffiti over at one of Trump's golf courses in Virginia, and it said Fat Nixon. And he says, the comparison is a little unfair to Nixon because, just as you say, Nixon had this enemies list and he kept it hidden. And when it came out, it ruined him.
Yeah.
And now you've got not only brazen, but trumpeted, right? It's not there's no hesitation about saying it as loudly and clearly as possible. In fact, using an instrument of the executive branch, the executive order, and writing it in there. I mean, for goodness sakes, it's like you have this constitutional prohibition against bills of attainder, right? Specially directed legislation. Well, here's an especially directed executive order that is designed for no other discernible purpose than to humiliate, intimidate, and
I believe
kind of ruin
in
a
the
critic.
executive order, it is pointed out that particularly the guy, I can't remember his name, the guy who
Krebs?
did the cybersecurity guy, that they should also be investigating his current place of work.
Yeah, I mean, get the hell out of here. You want to talk about cancel culture? Holy shit.
That's some serious
The other
cancel
thing,
culture,
Bob points out, and this is a very astute point, what's the difference between Nixon and Trump? It's not only that one of them is doing their business right on Main Street, the other one's, hidden memos.
Yeah.
It's that there's no shame. There's a real loss of any grounding sense of shame. It's the old McCarthy, line to McCarthy, at long last, sir, have you no decency?
Yeah.
Answer's in. No decency at all. We're just doing pure retribution all the time, and that should terrify everybody.
What is it like in your job and in your world in which there's so many fair weather defenders of speech? There's so many people, I think, probably for 4 years were sitting next to you at dinners and buying you drinks and being buddy-buddy who are now like, hold on a second. I mean, how frequently are you getting that? And are you disappointed or just used to it at this point of how inconsistent people are on the issue of speech?
Nico Perino says hypocrisy comes as no surprise. And God bless him, he's right, but it still hurts, man. It sucks. You think, wait a second, all that stuff you said, all those, checks you wrote, all that support you gave us, nothing.
Yeah.
It was really just about who was in power and who wasn't. I mean, I guess that's how it goes. Listen, I moved to the right of my parents when I joined the Democratic Party. I was a Green Party kid growing up and worked for Nader in undergrad.
Your parents were total Reds?
My parents, well, they were the Democratic Party was different. We voted Democrat, but it was, so I spent the first, 10, 15 years of my career working for folks that my friends and my family would think, what the hell are you doing defending these assholes? And I said, this is how free speech works. When I was a kid growing up listening to 2 Live Crew, they told me, the First Amendment protects all of us, and damn it, that's the work I'm doing. So here I am now, and all of a sudden I got all these folks with strange new respect for the work I'm doing. So I always tell my lawyers the hardest thing to do is just to stay in the same place. People are going to change around you, but you got to just stay in the same place, call it like you see it, and sooner or later people either appreciate it or won't. And sometimes they'll appreciate it, sometimes they won't.
Yeah, no, I'm noticing this too in various venues that I exist. People come and go, and they come and go because, hey, you're not on my team anymore. And one of the things that I like to point out to them is that on my text chain today, I'm gonna reveal a text chain secret.
Here we go.
Sorry, Camille Foster, but you know what? He did text me. We were talking about these things. A video from last year from AOC on CNN talking to Anderson Cooper, and it is true that there was not an apoplectic media in response to this or any sort of response at all. but it was AOC saying about the Texas ruling on the abortion pill that Biden should ignore the ruling.
Yeah.
And that was brazen. That was right out there. And it sucks when they do it too.
Yeah.
And, the conversations about court packing, right? The conversations about, well, the court's going to knock down my student loan forgiveness thing. We'll just go ahead anyway. Again, the difference being is that Trump is brazen and quite aggressive about it. But it's not as if this is new to the political culture in America, right?
No, you're right. I think, like we always say, we would have been busy under Harris-Waltz. There would have been plenty to do. All the groups that had disinformation things going, we would have seen all that, and we would have been pushing back. We were ready for that. We would have been busy too. But what's different about the last 100 days, the way I put it, is the volume. There's just a lot of it. The intensity. Thinking about the executive orders, the nature of it. It's uniquely targeted, uniquely retributive, and the scope. It's sweeping. We're going to pick a fight, not with, the definition of sexual harassment, and maybe we won't go through rulemaking. No, we're just going to cut off $500 million of federal funds and dare you to say no. That is what makes it feel different. And everything feels a little bit, a lot more, how can I say it, threatening.
I mean, a lot of this seems to be the playbook of, an activist like Chris Rufo, who is pretty, effective at what he does and pretty brazen when he says, we're just going to punch you in the mouth. That's what they do, and we're going to take a page out of their playbook. I mean, he was talking about Antonio Gramsci the other day, which is
again
a wild thing.
I never
Republicans talking or conservatives talking about Gramsci in a positive way. I mean, Steve Bannon used to say the same thing about Lenin, destroying institutions. I mean, there is something to that in the sense that it appears to me that even if they know they're going to lose a case, even if they know, it's not so much that they're going to ignore the courts on this. I mean, Trump has said, and I'm just going to try to take him at his word on this, that if the court rules otherwise, we will obey.
Yeah.
It does seem that the purpose of this stuff is the threat, right?
Yeah.
You're going to bring a ton of bricks. The federal government, the power of the federal government, down on your back, and we might not win this, but you're going to look twice over your shoulder now. And that's what's going to happen with Harvard and, Amazon. I was talking about this that said, we're going to put the tariff price. You saw this today? We're going to put, with tax, we're going to put the tariff price. And the administration freaked out. Trump called Bezos, and it was gone.
Right.
And that there's some idea of retribution
that
everyone is thinking about.
Yeah, that's right. The chill is the point, Michael. You nailed it. It's the half second you pause before you say something. It's the thought that, maybe I shouldn't hit send on that. And that's what they want. That's the point.
I've been doing that my whole life, but I probably shouldn't hit send on that.
Right. The poet Bob Holman's got a great poem called The Other Thing, and it's about the thing you don't say.
Yeah.
It's a good one. But I tell you what, that seems to be by design, and to me, it's fundamentally un-American to say, you have the right to say it, but we're going to make you pay for it any way we can, so you better not.
What's the worst thing you've seen, or the most surprising thing you've seen in the last 100 days?
I think the kneecapping of lawyers is pretty scary to me. I think the kneecapping of institutions is pretty scary. I think it's just, frankly, the lawlessness, right? You've got lawlessness in service of an unconstitutional end. The private institution like Harvard, you may not like them, but you don't try and nationalize them, which is effectively what Trump threatened Harvard with before they finally said, no, we can't go along with that. That really spooks me. The willingness.
Explain to people who don't follow this as closely as we do what the law firm stuff is.
Yeah.
Because to the average person, because somebody asked me this the other day who's not a very political person, said, wait, the Trump administration is pressuring them and they're going to do free legal work? How the hell did this happen? Yeah. And I was like, sit down, let's have a conversation. It's not the most logical thing that these kind of liberal-leaning, progressive-leaning law firms are now offering legal services?
No,
how is that happening?
It reflects, it's a weird result. It's completely gobsmacking, and it reflects the gravity of the threat that Trump brought to bear. He singled out law firms that had done some things he didn't like Defend Dominion, the voting machine company, for example, or done
Paul
various...
Weiss is the
Paul Weiss, or given to Democratic candidates, the other team, right? And he basically said, look, we're going to cut off your access to federal courts. We're going to fight you everywhere you can. We're going to pull your security clearances. We're going to make it impossible for you to be the zealous defenders that your clients are relying on. And not for nothing, we're going to put a big black mark on your name so that nobody's going to want to hire you in the first place. You think like PepsiCo is going to want to hire you? You can't even get into federal court. You know, I mean, like, you're going to be a shell of yourself. You got to make a hard decision. And so you have these firms suddenly bowing and scraping and promising to do, as you say, hundreds of millions of dollars in free legal work. And they were told that this free legal work would be in service of priorities of the administration, like Veterans Affairs. Sounds, you know, if not great, at least plausible. Turns out that that deal might change a little bit. All of a sudden, reporting indicates that Trump thinks of this like his personal legal piggy bank, that he's got free lawyers on retainer. He's got a gift card for Paul Weiss.
Yeah, I'm sure they're going to be working really hard for you. Yeah, they're going to pull out all the stops. I mean, want that lawyer.
That's right. You
the
want
one that has the gun to his back.
The 3-minute billable increments that, But still, like, it reminds me a little of the old Darth Vader, right? Pray I don't alter the deal any further. You think you're signing it for one thing, but he still has all the cards, all the leverage, and he can push your buttons and make you do things you didn't think you were going to do before. That capitulation has been very disappointing. And we're only 100 days in.
We're only 100 days in. And before we get to people, I just want to mention one thing. I did say this on a broadcast that I did on election night. I warned some people that I was around. I'm not going to make you play that, Jason. I'm not going to make you, because it's just to make me look good. I pointed this out on election night. I said, look, you fools, guess what? He's suing CBS for $10 billion for an interview that he was not involved in. And this idea, they keep on doing this idea that it's election interference. So basically everything, saying that the 2020 election was stolen, is that election? I mean, everything that comes out of the media could be election interference.
Right now, I mean, again, this shows you the scope of the threat, right? Yeah. The volume of the threat, like I was saying. We're, 50 minutes in? I haven't even mentioned the fact that we're representing pollster Ann Seltzer.
Oh, from Iowa.
From Iowa, from the Des Moines Register, the dean of Iowa polling. We're representing her because, as some folks may recall,
she got a poll wrong.
She had a poll where Harris was up 7 or something like that. And our guy, our commander-in-chief, never forgets a slight, so he filed some insane lawsuit against her as well. And the theory is that this is consumer fraud, that it's like a defective product, like you're selling a lemon of an automobile, that somehow, because you got the poll wrong, you're pushing this fraudulent product. And, again, the great Bob Corn Revere, my colleague, basically has to say, this is speech. We're talking about speech. You have the right to a political opinion. You have a right to a political opinion that's proven wrong. Yeah. This is America, goddammit. What are we doing?
I mean, it's amazing. Getting polls wrong can result in a court appearance. I mean, this stuff will be, I assume, laughed out of court.
That's the hope. But stay tuned. I knocked on wood a few minutes ago because the thing that's holding so far are the courts. As soon as the courts stop holding, it's who has more guns.
And we're going to go to our folks out there.
On that happy note.
But let me ask you a question first. Is that holding? Because there's been a lot of concern about ignoring the courts, primarily with this case of the guy that was sent. But that seems like it could be a one-off. I mean, right. I'm not sure. But is it your take and what you've observed that so far they have not tried to mess with the courts or ignore the courts' rulings?
There's been a lot of, let's say, unprofessional conduct that I think is justifiably warranting sanctions or criminal contempt, as the judge in the D.C. Case indicated might be in the offing. They've been pushing the line. These folks are habitual line steppers, and they're pushing right up to it. But what I mean by holding really is that the administration thus far has not blatantly said, to hell with you, you've made your ruling, let you enforce it, the old apocryphal Andrew Jackson. Yeah. We haven't seen that yet. When that happens, all bets are off.
Well, I was trying to end our part of the conversation on something that was positive. That was kind of positive, wasn't it?
So far, so good. Maybe 100 days
it could have been worse.
We still have a judiciary?
They haven't totally fucked it up yet, is the best thing that I can hope for it will. All right, we have some people out there who want to ask some questions. And I see, Ken, where should we get Ken? Let's get Ken in, and Ken, maybe Ken's going to yell at us, so who knows. Ken, how's it going, buddy?
I'm all right. I'm not going to yell at you.
All
First
right,
of all,
I like that.
sounds like I can yell if you'd like. I can raise my voice and say thank
Probably
you.
Do you have a question for
So you also,
for Will?
I hope so. But first, you two sound like traditional liberals, and it's refreshing. It's been a long time since I've heard traditional liberals. I'm not one, but I like traditional liberals much better than I like new liberals.
Yeah, I
So
didn't think
thank
I
you
was
for
one
that.
either, but I'll take it. I'll take it. I'm fine with it.
Well, I don't know you other than what you've been talking about here. So maybe you
Well,
know.
I'll just say that one of my favorite people is my namesake, no relation, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, a great Democrat. That's kind of probably where I would exist on the Cold War Democrat, something like that. It's probably a good way of describing myself.
So you're not related?
Not related, not related. I can pretend to sometimes.
darn.
Depends on how many drinks I have. I tell people that's my station in Midtown Manhattan. What's your question, Ken?
So I was canceled. I lost my job and my career. One of the major items in that was having a class. I was a professor. I had a class on decision making, and I pointed out that racial sexual stereotypes are not a good way to make decisions. And I used an example of a stereotype in class. I had an equal opportunity judgment against me, except by the time they got it, they couldn't call it equal opportunity because I hadn't violated any laws. It was protected free speech. The people doing this to me were the United States Air Force. They also violated the Constitution at least 3 other ways. I did talk to fire, but they could not help me. They didn't really explain why, but I assume it is because I have no legal recourse. And that's because the Merit Service Protection Board, hopefully I got that right, is a travesty. It's a complete travesty, unless you're a protected group. So I have no legal resource, and I think that's why fire said they couldn't help me. My question is, with the change in administration, has anything changed?
Well, that's first of all, I'm really sorry to hear about that. I'm glad you got in contact with us. My quick bet would be it's the fact you were at the Air Force
Institute.
Yeah.
Institute of Technology, not the Academy.
Yeah, that might be why. How long ago was it, Ken?
It was 2019, I think.
Yeah, that's my bet.
It was actually under Trump 1, but it would be very surprising if he knew, or if it was his plan.
Yeah. If your question is, has anything changed in these first 100 days that would give you a different result? I can't say that there has been. I know that as we've been discussing, the ideological poles have switched a little bit, right? And you've seen some of that in the military with the removal of books from the libraries on base and the purging of Jackie Robinson and the Tuskegee Airmen from the website. So you've got kind of these superficial culture war changes, but I can't say that either your matter or another matter wouldn't end up similarly. In fact, what may happen, and this is kind of the sad truth of it, the way these things all work in cycles, is that there may be folks who have the views that the folks who are punishing you held, and now they're getting the boot. So I'd like to see, speaking personally and professionally, I'd like to see a wider range of opinions given voice in our armed services and, not be cause for dismissal. That's how you learn. That's how you figure out new opinions, and you gain experience by coming into contact with people who don't hold your whatever preconceived notions.
That's sort of what I thought when I was teaching.
Yeah.
So there's nobody.
Most of us thought when we went to college. Yeah.
Right. That's kind of the point. So I'm sorry that folks lost you as a teacher, and I'm sorry to hear about your case. And I want to say I'm glad you contacted fire. And I'm sorry we couldn't help you.
Well, let me ask you a question.
So I have no legal recourse. There's no one I can talk to.
Well, I don't want to say that. As an attorney, let me say.
Well, there's nobody
You should contact an attorney. We'd be happy to give you one via our legal
I can give you
network.
legal advice, but it's not worth it.
They won't handle my case because there's absolutely no way they're going to get a settlement. And if they get a settlement, the government doesn't pay it anyway. Federal government doesn't pay settlements. So no one will represent a federal employee.
Yeah.
The whole federal employee law thing is a complete travesty. It's horrible.
Well, Ken, thank you for that. I'm sorry to hear that, and I want to ask Will something quickly as a follow-up about that. again, trying to put a positive gloss on things, and maybe there's some silver linings and some, bad behavior.
Sure.
A case like Ken's, perhaps in the future, will be less likely to be adjudicated in the way that it was because there's some eyes on people now. Is that maybe a positive thing about this?
That might be. And the other thing, Michael, is that maybe there's a little bit of a pendulum swing back. Maybe we've just lived through this really intense 10, 15 years with these kind of low-level ideological purges, the shaming, the judgment, now the excess from the right. Maybe at some point people are going to say, to hell with all that. Let's just give people a wider berth. That's my hope. I would say to folks on the right, back during Obama, I was like, well, maybe the good thing is that when the polls reverse, maybe people will dial it back a little bit. In other words, maybe there'll be some self-correction. I have to be an optimist to wake up and do this job every day. That's what I'm hopeful about.
I barely wake up every day because I'm not an optimist and everything is horrible. All right, Jacqueline, are you out there in Zoom land where we can? Where's Jacqueline? Hi, Jacqueline. How are you doing?
Hi. So I met a white supremacist group member on the internet who claimed that their groups don't necessarily support terrorism. So now I'm wondering if hate speech laws and what kind of speech should be protected to protect free speech in general. Like, should we continue to allow the KKK to march, for example?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's I really, really appreciate that. It's a very good question. And before I let Will answer that, I just want to point out, because he probably won't toot the horn of his own organization, is that there are some groups, civil liberties groups, who have backed away from that, particularly after Charlottesville. And that was the ACLU, who kind of turned their focus on other things. And FIRE, obviously, does protect the bad ideas of bad people, too. But what of that? And that was something that always mystified me, because we don't have hate speech laws in the United States. But I think there's a lot of people that think that there should be. I mean, what do you make of the idea of like a sort of European-style hate speech regime?
Well, I want to say, first of all, that speech can kick your ass, right? Speech can hurt. When I'm talking to college audiences and folks ask me, how come somebody can call me a racial slur? All right, free speech guy, what's so great about that? And I say, well, first of all, you figured out who an asshole is, right? Like, whoever's just said that to you has revealed something about themselves. It's the same reason you want to protect the right of the Klan to march. You want to understand who they are, what they believe, and how many of them are there, right? What kind of political power they have. And you want to be able to mobilize against it. If you outlaw that speech, you haven't driven away that idea. You haven't put it to rest. No one's going to change their mind. In fact, they're going to say, come listen to the ideas that are so crazy the government won't let you hear them. They're going to gain a foothold in power. That's what history teaches us, thinking about the Weimar Republic and any other kind of metastasizing social cancer like that. The way to address it is to drag it out in the sunshine, kicking and screaming, and take it head on. Now, I mentioned FIRE co-founder Harvey Silverglate before. Jewish man. He defended neo-Nazis in the 70s. And his friend said, Harvey, you're Jewish. How the hell can you defend these people? He said, well, look, if there's a Nazi in the room, I want to know who they are so I don't turn my back to them. You ever see Inglourious Bastards, Quentin Tarantino movie? There's that deal where like they carve the Nazi. Like, we can't let you go back into society. You're a Nazi. We got everybody to know that you're a Nazi. We'll carve the swastika on your forehead. Free speech, the Nazis carved the swastikas on their own forehead. You know who they are. So, it seems counterintuitive, but that's the radical proposition that free speech is that we protect that speech so we can see it, we can act against it, we can learn from it, we can define our own ideas against it, and that's all better than censoring it. Now, I want to just quickly say, not to filibuster too long here, but there are some exceptions. They're narrow, they're carefully defined, and they need to remain that way. But incitement, properly defined, that is speech intended and likely to cause imminent lawless action, not protected. True threats, speech that is directed to putting another person in serious fear of bodily harm or death. Again, it's a high bar, not protected. But for the most part, anything goes. To paraphrase our Chief Justice, John Roberts, as a nation, we've chosen a different course. We recognize that speech can really hurt, but we protect all speech so that the government never gets the power to say what you can and can't hear.
I will say, let me add one thing to that. I think that was perfectly put. But we have also created societal penalties for these kinds of views, rather than legal penalties. People say Elon Musk Twitter is a cesspool of craziness and anti-Semitism and racism and all that stuff. Is that true? It seems to be to me that it is actually the case. But what also seems to be true is that no one is revealing themselves. Why are they not revealing themselves? Why are they Twitter avatars? And why are they handles and not their full names? Because they know they'll never get a job again. They know that it's Googleable, and people don't like those ideas. To be associated with those ideas is a punishment, is a societal punishment, and it's going to follow you and dog you for your entire life. That's why we don't outlaw this stuff. We have our own punishments, and I think they're pretty good. I think it's good to destroy people publicly.
That reminds me of a funny case we had early on my time at Fire, and I'll never forget this one. It was a guy who'd written to us. He said, our First Amendment rights have been violated. And, so you start reading the case submission. Something like he woke up on Halloween, didn't have a Halloween costume, white guy, puts on a Paul Pierce Boston Celtics jersey and goes full blackface.
They still do it. It's how many years has this happened that people are like, I'm going to do it? No. Do you have a fucking newspaper?
Do you
ever
friends?
look at the internet?
Is there anybody around?
No. I mean, people are like, I'm going to be Paul Robeson in like 1945. It's like, no, it's always bad. It's always going to fuck you up.
He goes around all day. He said everybody is mean to him. Everybody shunned him, and he feels as though his free speech rights have been violated. We had to say, buddy.
No, that's just bad judgment on your part.
System works.
I do have. This is why, by the way, that you should give money to Fire, because they you know why they need money? Because they have to waste their time politely telling people that no, we can't take your case when you did blackface to be an NBA player. That costs money to say no. That's expensive.
Now listen, if he's at a public school or a private school that promises free speech, and the school comes down on him, different case.
That's a different case. So if you want to create something, go to UMass Boston dressed up as Paul Pierce. We got another one. Paul. Is this the guy? Yeah, Paul.
How's it going? Michael, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Paul. Are you in the back of an Uber?
No, I'm in a car. In my car. Do you want me to put the light on?
All right. Well, I just hope you don't live there. Is that you're good, right?
No.
All right.
Three maybe questions, like kind of pushbacks against what you just said, and not. I want to throw clear that it's not necessarily my opinion, but I think with let's see, start with the lawyer thing.
Sure.
How does how does that is that different than, for instance, when the lawyers for the January 5th people, they when they tried to bring those voting cases, they went after them with the bar associations and tried to get their legal licenses. I think even Rudy Giuliani lost his legal license. How's that isn't that a First Amendment kind of deal? I don't. That's one thing.
Let's go with this one at a time. Will, I want to answer that. It's a very good question.
It is a good question.
Because I see that kind of stuff happen.
We've got it. Yeah. I think, again, it's a different in scale, right? Like if you had said, hey, Paul Weiss is engaged in fraudulent conduct. Here's the situation. We're going to go through the bar discipline process. Different deal, right? That's not what happened here. You had an order from on high saying thou shalt not be involved in any federal security clearance, and we're pulling all of it. Again, it's the difference in means, and that means something. So that's kind of my first cut at that. Are there these impulses on both sides? Absolutely. Michael named a few before where you had folks on the left talking about disregarding Supreme Court rulings. It sucks no matter what side it comes from. The difference here, and not to get sucked into the endless what about this, what about that, but the difference here is where it's coming from, and it's got the entire force of the federal government behind it.
Second question. I'll let you have the second one, too.
Okay, thanks. The second question is with the settlements. I don't agree with them. I think it's obviously against the First Amendment. But just for like the argument's sake, with the lawsuit, the lawyers' case, how like the pro bono thing, how is that any different than a consent decree that they like, I remember with Google had a class action lawsuit, they settled, and part of the case, the settlement was they had to give all this money to all these, NGOs that are advocacy groups that, represent, like technology cases and stuff like that. Right. How is that any different?
I mean, that's because it went through a court, right?
I was about to say same premise, same
verse. Well, you could make the argument that they preemptively, I don't know. There's sometimes they'll have like the racial discrimination case. Okay, yeah, sorry.
But Paul, preemptively, there's that word is doing a lot of work there, right? Because you got to go through the court process. That's the problem. If there's a consent decree over Google or anybody who's been a defendant in a federal action, that's something that goes through the courts. You got evidence, you got notice, you got an opportunity to respond, you got all the niceties, all the essentialities of the legal process. When you just say, you know what, I don't like it because you said something I don't like, we're pulling your whole federal security clearance. That kind of arbitrary, subjective, willy-nilly decision-making is anathema to our rule of law, our system of checks and balances.
All right, I'm going to feel. All right, do we have one more? Well, thanks for the question.
It's a good question.
And I hope you weren't driving when you were doing that. It just looked like you might have been. All right, we've been going long, and it took you a while to get here. You had to drive all over Brooklyn.
Thank you so much for your patience.
No, it was our fault. Will Creeley. He's fighting the good fight. He's providing you with that primer on what all this stuff means. And we definitely are going to have to come back to you in the future because you know why? I have a sense that this isn't over.
we might just be in for one. I want to say thank you for saying primer, right?
Yeah.
God bless
It's not
you.
Primer. That's something you put on the wall when you're painting.
Man after my own heart.
All right. Thanks for joining us. And be back on Thursday. And we'll be coming to you from the new Moynihan Report YouTube channel. You can find the link for that in the description. So go there and subscribe. Smash the subscribe button. That's what the kids say. And you'll get to see on Thursday. This is going to be great because we're doing a May Day episode because we just don't care. And this is going to be a conversation with the New York Times journalist and author Clay Risen, who has a new book that I'm just about finished with called Red Scare, Blacklist, McCarthyism, and the Making of Modern America. Some legal stuff in there that we can talk about. And there might be a little something that we're going to debut in front of that, but you have to come and see because it's going to be pretty cool. And I'm looking forward to that one. All right. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you on Thursday. Be there.